Hey guys, tonight we're plunging deep into the brutal, clanging chaos of the medieval battlefield, not from above, not in the third person, but through your eyes, your sweat, your armor. You're a knight, though not yet the glamorous, chivalry-soaked version they'll write songs about. Right now, you're just a nervous heap of muscle and metal on the edge of your very first skirmish. The morning fog clings to the damp grass. Somewhere, a crow cackles in the distance like it already knows how this ends. Your armor creaks as you shift your weight, and your heartbeat thunders harder than the drums at the rear of the column. The sword in your hand feels like it was forged from solid regret, and if you're lucky, your opponent is just as scared. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and your current time in the comments. I love seeing who's listening and when. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't charge in right away. No, that's for the movies. In real life, you stand awkwardly on uneven ground, waiting for someone to blow a horn or yell something heroic sounding. But no one does. Instead, a crossbow bolt whizzes past your ear, snapping you into action and panic. You rush forward, nearly tripping on a root. The guy next to you vomits into his helmet. Romantic, right? Your first swing misses entirely. The enemy isn't standing still like a training dummy. He's weaving, snarling, his eyes wide with the same terror you feel. He slashes low, and your shin takes the brunt right where the armor didn't cover. A white-hot burn shoots up your leg. Welcome to combat. Here's a historical gem for you. During the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, many knights fought knee-deep in mud, their armor so heavy that if they fell, they couldn't get up without help. And no one's helping you right now. You stumble, regain footing, and try to breathe through the nausea. The stink of blood, sweat, and rotting grass fills your nostrils. You didn't imagine it smelling like this. Your training was noble and clean. You practiced forms in the sunlit yard of your liege lord's keep, with banners fluttering and squires watching admiringly. Now, you're slogging through screaming men and dismembered limbs, realizing that honor doesn't stand a chance against sheer, frantic survival. Someone bumps you from behind a squire, maybe, or a fellow knight whose face is already smeared with blood. "Move!" he growls, and you do. You move because standing still is worse. Ahead, an enemy knight on foot is locked in brutal combat with one of your men. Their swords ring against each other like church bells gone mad. You see an opening. You take it. Your sword lands solid against the back of the enemy's leg right behind the greave. He crumples, howling. You don't feel good about it. You feel sick. That's the part no one told you. Your first kill doesn't feel heroic. It feels like you broke something invisible inside yourself. Historians still argue whether medieval knights were trained to be emotionally desensitized, or if many went home carrying quiet trauma. But judging by your shaking hands and cold sweat, you're not exactly a steel-hearted war machine. Not yet. And then, just like that, the tide shifts. Trumpets blare behind you, signaling retreat or victory you honestly can't tell. Your ears ring from the din. You stagger back toward your lines, bumping into bodies, some alive, some not. A man with an arrow through his neck claws at your leg, gurgling. You step around him because there's nothing else you can do. Later, maybe, you'll pray for his soul. Right now, you need to make it back to the tree line before another volley of arrows darkens the sky. You finally collapse behind a small rise, chest heaving, vision swimming. Your armor feels like it's filled with molten lead. A squire runs up and offers you water, but you wave him off. You're not sure if you'll keep it down. Your first battle is over, and you're still alive. Barely. That's supposed to be a good sign. And yet, as you sit there trembling, you overhear a veteran nearby chuckling through broken teeth. He's bragging about how many skulls he crushed, how he bit a man's nose off once in the mud. You want to believe he's exaggerating, but part of you knows he isn't. He's seen 10 times what you just did, and kept coming back for more. You lie down on your back, staring up at the ash-coloured sky. Your body hums with pain, your mind with disbelief. They'll call you a knight now, maybe even a hero. But right now, you just feel hollow, and hungry, and very, very tired. No one warned you that chivalry comes with blood in your boots. Your morning starts with a rooster when someone's joke, probably because no one brings poultry to a battlefield camp unless it's headed straight to the pot. But there it is. crowing cheerfully while your back aches like it's been stomped on by 3 oxen and a vengeful mule. You groan and sit up, realizing your armor is still partially on from the night before. That's mistake number 1. Getting armored up isn't something you just do. It's a full-blown ritual, and like all medieval rituals, it involves more people than necessary and smells faintly of mold. First, your squirebless, his eternally exhausted soul, shows up with your gambeson, a padded jacket that feels like being wrapped in a damp mattress. It's stuffed with horsehair, or straw, or maybe both, depending on how recently your lord sprang for new supplies. "Lift your arms," the squire mutters. You do, reluctantly, and he yanks the gambeson down, pulling your linen shirt with it. Now you're wheezing, arms stuck up like a half-baked loaf of bread, while he straps your arming points, those fiddly little cords that tie your armor to your body. There are about 24 of them, and if even one is wrong, something is going to pinch in a very personal place later. Piece by piece, you become less of a man and more of a walking ironclad oven. Chainmail first. It jingles as it goes on, 1,000 tiny rings that weigh more than your first love. Then comes the breastplate, cuisses, greaves, gauntlets. Your squire grunts, wipes sweat from his brow, and mutters something about, "Wish I'd been born a monk." And the helmet? That's the final indignity. The moment it goes on, your world turns into a tiny iron box. Your vision narrows to 2 holes. Your hearing muffles. Your breath rebounds into your face like a hot fog of anxiety, and you've still got a lance to carry. It's approximately the size of a small tree. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the night. A full suit of late medieval plate armor could weigh anywhere from 45 to 60 pounds. Knights weren't helpless turtles once they fell, but the armor made everything harder. Sitting, climbing, even relieving yourself became a tactical maneuver. Speaking of that, no, your armor doesn't come with a trapdoor. You either plan ahead, or you have a very awkward afternoon. You wonder if you'll ever get used to the smell of 5 knights all sweating into layers of wool and metal under the summer sun. Probably not. One of them smells like boiled onions today. You hope it's not you. As you finally mount up, hoisted by 2 men and a nearby stump, your warhorse shifts impatiently beneath you. He's smarter than most people you know, also grumpier. His name's probably something like Thunderclap or Bonecrusher, but you secretly call him Gerald because it sounds less threatening, and he definitely responds to it. Your lance rests awkwardly in the crook of your elbow. It's long, unbalanced, and mostly for show unless you're in a proper charge, which today you are. You can hear the commander yelling orders. You're in the front line, because apparently someone saw you not die yesterday and decided you were now reliable. Oh, historians still debate just how coordinated medieval battles actually were. The nice diagrams with labelled formations are usually wishful thinking from later chroniclers. In reality, everything depended on yelling, banners, drums, and blind luck. You grip the reins, squinting through your helmet's visor. Across the field you can barely make out enemy cavalry. Banners flap in the breeze. You think you see a red lion or maybe a goose. Doesn't matter. They're going to try to kill you either way. A trumpet blares, horses rear, and then chaos. You and 100 other armoured knights thunder forward, hooves pounding like drums of war. Your lance wobbles with each step. You lower it, aim it toward a cluster of moving metal. You scream something, maybe a war cry, maybe just raw fear. The impact jars every bone in your body. Your lance hits something hard. Wood cracks. You fly forward slightly, jerked by your saddle's high cantle. Your horse veers instinctively. You drop what's left of the lance and draw your sword, slashing sideways as another knight careens past. He's not graceful. Neither are you. Your sword connects with his shoulder, but the angle's wrong, and it glances off. He turns, eyes wide, and swings back. Sparks fly. Your ears ring from the steel-on-steel impact. This isn't a duel. It's bumper horses with pointy bits. You barely manage to stay in the saddle as another rider plows past, knocking your shield askew. Someone grabs your bridling enemy foot soldier trying to pull you down. Gerald reacts first. He kicks. The man goes flying. You don't look back. Somewhere in all this madness, your commander is trying to regroup the cavalry. Or maybe he's unconscious under a tree. You'll find out later. Right now, it's every knight for himself. You wheel your horse around, scanning for friendly banners. You see, or maybe it's just a curtain someone brought for dramatic flair. Hard to tell. Everything's a blur of motion, armor, dust, and pain. Eventually the enemy lines break. They retreat, slowly at first, then faster. Your own men cheer, but it sounds hollow through your helmet. Your arms ache. Your sword hand is numb. You're still on your horse somehow. Gerald snorts and walks you out of the blood-soaked field like he's done it 100 times. You don't feel like a hero. You feel like a blacksmith's anvil after a particularly angry day. But you survived again. That's 2 in a row. You start to think, maybe you're getting the hang of this. Then you remember you've got to take all this armor off again. You're sitting on a log, or at least what passes for a log after 24 other knights have parked their armored behinds on it. Your squire is trying to clean your helmet with what looks like an old rag, soaked in something suspiciously brown. You pretend not to notice. You're too focused on the distant clinking of horseshoes and the unmistakable creak of wagons filled with fresh lances. That can only mean one thing. Another charge is coming. You'd think a cavalry charge would be the high point of a knight's day. It's what you're trained for, what the bards love to sing about. The thunder of hooves, the dust cloud rising, the sunlight gleaming off your polished plate, except your plate isn't polished anymore. It's streaked with mud, dented at the hip, and smells faintly of fish for reasons you don't want to investigate. Your lance is handed to you like it's a sacred relic. In truth, it's barely more than a glorified fence post. It's long, heavy, and splinters easily, which is sort of the point. A good lance breaks on impact. That's supposed to prevent your shoulder from doing the same. It doesn't always work. You shift uncomfortably in your saddle. The horse beneath you, Gerald, of course, is already pacing like he knows what's coming. He does. He's done this more times than you. His ears flick back at your slightest movement. He's not afraid. He's just annoyed you didn't bring an apple. The horn sounds. You grip the lance with both hands and lower it into position. Your shield is already numb against your left arm, and your fingers tingle inside their metal shell. Your visor slams down with a final clang, locking you into a dark, narrow world with only one direction: forward. Now here's a bit of quirky battlefield knowledge. Some knights tied themselves to their saddles during charges so they wouldn't fall off. Bold? Maybe. But once you're tied in, you better hope your horse doesn't fall, because if he goes down, you're going with him, and you won't be getting up. The earth begins to tremble. The line of knights to your left and right stretches like a shining river of steel. Spears point forward. Banners ripple in the wind. It should feel epic. Instead, it feels like your stomach has turned to soup. You charge. The wind roars in your ears. Your armor rattles like 1,000 angry coins. You lower your lance, aiming somewhere near the chest of the approaching knight. You don't even see his face, just the shield. The impact is absurd. It's like slamming into a wall at full gallop. The lance snaps in half. Something hits your shoulder, then your helmet, and then nothing. You wake up in the mud, not in a poetic, symbolic way. Literally face down in a patch of churned-up dirt and trampled grass. You blink and see your own gauntlet inches from your eyes. You roll over, your ribs groaning in protest, and stare at the grey sky. Your ears ring. There's shouting. You're alive. Technically, you stagger to your feet. Your left leg is asleep, and your visor is dented. You yank it up, panting. Gerald is trotting back toward you, snorting like, "Where have you been?" You grab the reins, mount up using the nearest broken fence, and limp back into the fray. Historians still argue whether knights actually preferred charging other knights or picking off infantry. On the one hand, there's honor. On the other, there's common sense. A charging knight could cleave through peasant ranks like a scythe through wheat. Easier targets. Fewer lances aimed at your throat. You regroup with the others. Most of them look as bad as you, mud-caked, bleeding, and out of breath. The commander rides past, barking something about pressing the advantage. No one moves. "Press the advantage," he repeats. Someone coughs. You hear the clink of chainmail. One knight sighs loudly and mutters something about wanting a bath and a roast duck. But orders are orders. You wheel your horse around and start forward again. Not at a charge this time, just a grim trot across a field littered with broken weapons, dismembered limbs, and the occasional very surprised-looking corpse. You try not to look too closely. Here's your mainstream historical tidbit. During the Battle of Crécy in 1346, French knights charged English longbowmen repeatedly, despite being cut down in waves. It's a case study in stubborn bravery, or just poor communication. You're not charging longbowmen today, just scattered foot soldiers trying to regroup. You swing your sword at one who gets too close. He stumbles, then flees. Another raises a shield, which your blade bounces off with a jolt that stings your wrist. You're too tired to curse. You just keep moving. Eventually, the skirmish dies down. The enemy retreats or runs, more like. You pull back once again, your sword heavy in your hand, your whole body aching. You've now survived not one but 2 cavalry charges. That probably makes you a veteran. Or just lucky. Back at camp, you dismount with a grunt. Gerald wanders off toward the water trough without a backward glance. Your squire appears with a pail of water and a hunk of hard bread. You eat both without thinking, realizing only halfway through that the bread is at least a week old, and possibly older than your boots. You sit on the same log as before. It's even less comfortable now. Your armor creaks as you move. The dents will need hammering out. The leather straps are fraying, and the chainmail under your arm smells like spoiled milk. But hey, you're alive. That's the new bar for success. As night falls, someone starts a song by the fire. It's off-key, and features too many verses about sausages. You lean back, letting the heat wash over you, and wonder if this will ever feel normal. It won't. But tomorrow, you'll pick up another lance, and ride again. The field is quiet now, which is always the most unsettling part. It's not silence in the peaceful, birdsong and breeze kind of way. No, it's the kind of silence that comes after shouting, after screaming, after metal has stopped crashing and men have stopped moving. The ground is still soft with churned up earth and something darker. You're walking now, one slow step after another, the squelch beneath your boots letting you know exactly what kind of battlefield this is. You remember how they used to describe battlefields in training like chessboards with elegant moves and clear winners. But this isn't chess. It's a barnyard flooded with blood and despair. You pass a broken spear lodged into a dead man's back. His mouth is open, his eyes glassy. You don't stop. You can't. There's a certain rhythm to post-battle life, a sequence of movements that no one really teaches but everyone learns. You wipe your blade. You check your wounds. You check your horse. You try not to meet the eyes of the ones who didn't get up. The stench hits again. Rot, iron, and something that might have once been Sufard to say. A knight nearby retches noisily behind a cart. You don't blame him. The worst smell isn't the blood. It's the innards. Guts. Split open and cooking under the midday sun. Carry a scent that seeps into your lungs and stays there long after the armor's been taken off. Here's a real battlefield fact to ruin your sleep. It wasn't uncommon for armies to lose more men after the battle than during it. Disease spread fast when you left hundreds of corpses rotting in the open. Soldiers caught fevers, infections, and things that didn't have names, yet just symptoms. You step over a tangle of limbs, some still twitching, and look toward the makeshift medical tent. It's a blanket strung between 2 poles and guarded by a man with a stick. You're not sure why. No one's trying to sneak in. No one wants to see what's going on in there. A man screams, high-pitched, sudden. It cuts through the quiet like a knife. You don't flinch. You've heard it before. That's the leg-sawing sound. Probably another knight whose armor wasn't enough to stop a hammer blow to the thigh. You wonder if he'll live. Then you wonder if it would be better if he didn't. Historians still debate how effective medieval battlefield medicine really was. Some claim surgeons were more advanced than we give them credit for, with knowledge of antiseptics, cauterization, and even basic anesthesia using herbs. Others argue it was more guesswork, good luck, and strong belts to bite. You keep walking. A crow hops from a severed hand to a torn tunic, unbothered by your presence. You shoo it away half-heartedly. It hops again, bolder this time. You realize it's not afraid of knights. Why would it be? We're just delivery systems for fresh meat now. You spot your commander beneath a tilted pavilion. His breastplate is off, his shirt soaked through with sweat. He's speaking with 2 men hunched over a stained map, pointing at something far beyond the horizon. You know what they're planning. The next move, the next march, the next village to besiege. You sit down on a barrel and close your eyes. You dream barely for what might be 20 minutes or 2. A field of grass, a creek, the sound of bees. Then your squire is there, tapping your shoulder with the delicacy of someone who's done this before. "There's food," he says, almost apologetically. You follow him to the campfire where stew bubbles in a blackened pot. You hope it's not horse. You know it probably is. They hand you a bowl, you sit on a rock, and for the first time all day, you chew without thinking about death. Your spoon hits something solid. Potato? You don't look. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. During the 100 Years' War, some knights carried personal pewter spoons tucked into their belts. It was considered a mark of rankhand, a way to make sure you didn't end up sharing a communal ladle with someone coughing blood into their stew. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the field. A few monks wander among the bodies now, saying prayers or writing names. You nod to one as he passes. He doesn't nod back. His eyes are fixed on a child-sized corpse lying near the trees. You look away. You make your way to the edge of camp, where the breeze is a little less heavy. There's a stream here, small, quiet. You sit, remove your gauntlets, and dip your hands into the water. It's cold, clean, utterly disconnected from the horror just 50 paces behind you. You splash your face and breathe. Somewhere, someone sings again. A new voice this time, softer. It's a hymn maybe, or a lullaby. You don't recognize the words, but the melody settles around you like a blanket. You look at your reflection in the stream. Mud-streaked cheeks, a bruise forming near your temple. Blood knot your son, your neck. You look like a knight. You also look like a butcher. You lie back on the grass, armor creaking. The stars begin to peek through the clouds. For a moment, the battlefield fades. You think of your childhood, of tilting at straw dummies, of pretending the backyard pig was a dragon. It's different now. You don't play anymore. But tomorrow, you'll rise, clean your blade, and ride again. Because in this world, the knight who hesitates is already dead. Morning doesn't come with birdsong today. It comes with coughing. Wet, hacking, deep in the lungs coughing, the kind that vibrates through the entire camp and makes you pull your blanket a little closer, not for warmth, but for comfort. It's cold, sure, but it's also the kind of cold that wraps itself around the edges of yesterday's nightmares. You open your eyes slowly. The fire's out. Your armor lies beside you like a half-dead companion, and your first thought is, I hope the enemy feels worse than I do. Your joints ache, and there's a tender spot on your shin that's either a bruise or an omen. You prod it. Yep, probably both. The squire brings breakfast. Bread like a brick and a bit of something grey that claims to be cheese. You chew slowly. It's quiet. Too quiet. Then you hear horses. Many horses. Not yours. You rise at once, grabbing your gear. Gerald snorts nearby, already alert. He senses it too. Riders on the ridge. Armor catching the rising sun. Another company. Another banner. And your breath catches. Foreigners. Not the usual enemy. Not the ones you recognize by crest or colors. These are the knights from across the border. The ones your elders whispered about with grudging respect and a little fear. You hear the clink of weapons being readied. No orders yet. Just the low murmur of men tightening straps, pulling on greaves, muttering prayers into gloved hands. You join them, falling into line almost instinctively. Your shoulder still throbs from yesterday's clash, but your sword hand feels steady enough. That'll have to do. You remember the stories. These knights don't follow the same codes. No chivalric banter, no calls for ransom, just sharp steel and cold eyes. The kind of men who decorate their shields with bone and wear black cloaks not because they're stylish, but because they're practical for bloodstains. Historians still argue whether the ideals of chivalry were widely practiced or mostly propaganda. Sure, there were knights who spared the weak, upheld justice, and followed rules of honor. But there were plenty more who just wanted gold, land, and maybe a dramatic poem written about their latest murder spree. You and your unit move to the edge of the clearing, eyes fixed on the incoming formation. They dismount. That's never a good sign. Knights who dismount are here to fight hard. You exchange a glance with the knight next to you, Sir Marken, whose beard probably has its own war stories, and he gives you a slight nod. You both draw swords. The charge doesn't come. Not this time. This is a foot battle. A slower, kind of brutal. It begins with a horn blast, and the clattering sprint of armoured men rushing into the space between your lines. You lunge forward, slipping slightly in the mud but regaining your footing just in time to parry a blow that would have cracked your collarbone like dry wood. The enemy knight you face doesn't speak. He grunts. He swings hard, and he doesn't aim fancy. Just solid, chopping arcs like he's trying to break a wall. You block 1, 2, then strike low. Your blade slides along his thigh plate. No blood. He's too well armoured. You pivot, Catch him with your shield. Knock him off balance. He falls, but even as he hits the ground, he tries to stab you in the knee. You step back. You've learned. You've seen what happens to those who lean in too close too early. Another knight comes at you. Smaller, faster. His swordplay is elegant, almost dance-like. You counter his rhythm with a brute force swing that knocks him back. Your gauntlet connects with his helm, and you hear the hollow clang of metal on metal. He staggers. You kick right into his chest. It's not noble, but it works. You lose track of time. There's no rhythm in this fight. It's chaos. Someone's yelling commands, but the noise drowns it out. Steel rings. Men fall. Horses scream in the distance, and the stench of sweat, blood, and fear grows heavy in your nostrils. Eventually, it ends. Not with a trumpet, not with a grand, cinematic call to cease, just with exhaustion. The kind that makes men drop their weapons, collapse where they stand, and pray no one stabs them while they breathe. You're still upright, just barely. Your armor is streaked with gore. Your fingers tremble as you loosen your sword from the buckler of a fallen knight who nearly took your eye out. His face is hidden, but his gloved hand still twitches slightly. You step away. That's someone else's job now. Back at the edge of camp, someone's already setting up makeshift tables. They're not for food. They're for identifying the dead. You toss your helm on the ground and sink onto a crate. Gerald walks over, nudges your shoulder gently. You smile at him. He doesn't smile back. He's a horse. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some elite knights of the period named their weapons like beloved pets, Faithful Lucy, Death's Whistle, or, in one rather disturbing case, Mother's Tongue. Yours doesn't have a name. Not yet, but after today, you're starting to think it's earned one. Around you, the camp is quiet again. Wounded groan. A squire sobs quietly as he tries to bandage a knight's ruined hand. The fire hasn't been relit yet. You rest your head back, looking up at the thickening clouds. Rain, maybe. Or just the ash of another skirmish that came too soon, ended too late, and proved nothing. That foreign knight you knocked down? He didn't get up. You saw the way he fell. You didn't feel proud. You felt tired. You wonder how many more knights like him will arrive before this war gets bored of itself. The rumble begins at dawn deep and distant, like thunder buried underground. At first you think it's a storm. You even lift your head from the bundle of cloaks you've been pretending is a pillow. But there's no lightning, no breeze, just that deep, measured boom, boom, boom. Siege engines, big ones. You sit up slowly, your body protesting every motion. Gerald's already awake, calmly chewing something vaguely hay-like. You envy his calm. You're not facing knights today. You're facing something worse. Waiting. Siege warfare is, in a word, tedious. You'd almost prefer the chaos of the open battlefield. At least that ends quickly. But a siege? That can last weeks, months. You don't charge. You sit. You wait. You rot. Your company's set up a few hundred paces from the enemy Walser, sprawling stone fortress with towers like fingers clawing at the sky. Archers already dot the parapets. You're far enough to be safe, but close enough to be stared at. And stared at you are. You lift your hand to scratch your nose, and somewhere up there, a crossbowman raises his own hand to mimic you. You nod. He waves. This is going to be a weird few weeks. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Siege of Kenilworth in 1266 lasted over 6 months, the longest in English history. 6 months of waiting, rationing, hurling rocks, and dodging arrows. You're hoping this one wraps up sooner, but you're not betting your best armor on it. The engineers roll up the first trebuchet around midday. It's enormous, more tree than machine. They spend the better part of the afternoon positioning it, checking the counterweight, adjusting the sling. You watch from your tent, sipping weak ale and chewing something that might be dried venison or very old boot leather. Your squire says it's meat. You don't ask questions. By evening, the trebuchet is ready. A rock the size of a sheep is loaded into the sling. The crew heaves. The machine groans. Then release. The stone arcs through the air, majestically, beautifully, and smashes into a section of the wall with a dull, disappointing thud. Not even a crack. You hear a few sarcastic cheers from your side. One man claps slowly. Someone else yells, "Try again, lads! You almost scared a pigeon!" Meanwhile, inside the castle, someone retaliates. A ballista bolt shoots out from a hidden tower and spears straight through a supply wagon. Flour spills like snow across the grass. That hurts more than losing a man, honestly. Good flour is hard to come by, and then the rain starts. Siege camps are, in essence, villages made of boredom and filth. The moment it rains, everything turns to soup. Your tent leaks. Your boots fill with mud. Someone in your unit steps in something that was once food and is now very much not. Tempers fray. Fights break out. One knight accuses another of cheating at dice. The second knight punches him with a mailed fist and breaks 3 knuckles. Nobody wins. You stay mostly quiet. You keep your sword sharp. You clean your armor obsessively, not because it needs it, but because it's something to do. Gerald lets you braid his mane. You're not proud of it, but again boredom. Here's your fringe tidbit. During prolonged sieges, some defenders threw beehives or rotting animal carcasses over the walls to spread disease or panic. You've already seen one pig fly today. It landed, unfortunately, near the cook fire. There was screaming. As the days stretch on, dysentery hits the camp. It always does. You hear it before you see it, men doubled over behind tents, the stink crawling through the air like a living thing. Your squire boils water obsessively. You don't argue. You'd rather drink your own sweat than risk whatever's in the communal bucket. Still, the siege goes on. You get used to the sounds, the thwack of arrows, the clunk of siege towers being wheeled closer inch by painful inch, the shouted orders, the groans, the distant singing from inside the walls. Yes, they sing, just to mock you. There's one song in particular that's become a camp-wide curse. Something about bread and dancing. You hate it with the force of 1,000 lances. Historians still debate how much these long sieges affected morale. Some records claim knights stayed noble and dignified throughout. Others describe them as descending into gambling, drunkenness, and elaborate competitions involving rats and string. You know which one you believe. One morning, just after dawn, a small breach appears in the outer wall. It's nothing big, just a crack and a chunk of stone missing, but it's hope. The commander orders everyone to prepare. You strap on your gear faster than usual. Even Gerald seems ready. Maybe today's the day. But the breach is defended well. Too well. Archers pin down anyone who gets close. A boiling oil trap takes out 6 men. The rest fall back, smoking and screaming. Your unit stays behind the line, watching, waiting. Another day, maybe. Maybe not. Back at camp, someone throws a feast for morale. That means thin stew, warm wine, and a bard who only knows 4 songs. You listen anyway. You need the distraction. You stare into the fire and wonder if you'll live long enough to forget what boiled oil smells like on human flesh. Then someone laughs, really laughs at a joke about a knight and a nun. And for a second, just a second, you're not in a siege. You're at a feast. You let yourself laugh too, quietly. You fall asleep that night to the creak of trebuchets and the soft murmur of prayers. You dream of walls falling and birds flying, and you wonder which will happen first. Dawn breaks with a sound you never want to hear, the clash of steel inside your own camp. You sit up so fast your back spasms, and for a moment you're caught between dream and waking, between siege and slaughter. Then you see the smoke, curling black and oily into the pale sky, and your instincts kick in. Your sword is already in your hand before your boots are even on. Gerald snorts anxiously near the edge of your tent, shifting from hoof to hoof. He senses it too. Today's going to be the kind of day that gets recorded in someone's grim little chronicle. Not the kind with songs and parades, but the kind with footnotes and body counts. You stumble into the open, heart racing, only to find that it's not a full-scale assault. Not yet. It's a raid. A small band of enemy knights has somehow slipped through the woods behind your lines, probably led by a local who knew the goat paths and was promised a very shiny bag of coins. The attack is fast, savage, and cruelly efficient. Tents collapse under sword swings. Fires spread. A cartload of spears is overturned into the latrine trenchagon. You see a knight dragged screaming from his sleep, still tangled in his blanket, trying to punch his way to glory with nothing but a candlestick. You charge without thinking. Your armor isn't fully buckled, but your sword is sharp and your blood's already boiling. The first enemy you meet is masked, light on his feet, and surprisingly good with a curved blade. He dances sideways, striking low, nicking your thigh. You grunt and swing wide. He ducks, But Gerald bless that glorious horse plows right into him from the side. You finish the job before he can get up. Here's your historical fact. Prisoners taken during battle or raids could be worth a small fortune. Ransom was often more profitable than loot. A high-ranking knight might be worth the equivalent of 10 years' income. You're painfully aware of this as you see another enemy knight trying to drag one of your wounded toward the woods like a sack of coins. You shout, charge, and intercept. Your blade meets his shoulder, and he reels, dropping the man. You don't pause. You follow through, knocking him down and slamming your shield against his helmet until he stops moving. Later, someone might call that chivalry. You know better. The raiders don't stick around. They never do. Like wasps, they sting, kill, and vanish. Within the hour, they're gone, and you're left with the aftermath: burnt supplies, injured men, and a strange, gnawing feeling of violation. They didn't win, but they hurt you anyway. As you pull your dented greave from where it half melted beside a cooking fire, a squire hands you a water skin and mutters, "We weren't ready." You nod. No one ever is. You walk the camp slowly, helping where you can, but mostly staying out of the surgeon's way. The medic tent is full overflowing, really. Moans drift out into the open air. One knight is screaming for his brother, not realizing his brother is lying 2 rows over with a broken spine. No one has the heart to tell him. You kneel beside the commander's tent, where someone is scribbling a tally. Dead, missing, captured. Every name another stone in your gut. You ask how many prisoners they took. 12, someone says. Maybe more. They were quick. Captured. You try not to picture it, but your mind goes there anyway. Historians still argue what fate awaited captured knights. Some were held for ransom and treated well-fed, even honored in a strange way. Others were stripped of armor, mocked, tortured, and left to rot if their families couldn't or wouldn't pay. And you don't know which kind of captor you'd get. You don't want to find out. Here's a fringe detail for you. In some battles, knights disguised themselves as lowly foot soldiers to avoid being identified and ransomed. They'd ditch their crests, scuff their armor, even fake accents. Honor was nice until it got you locked in a damp tower, with nothing but rats and regret. You return to your own tent, if it can still be called that. The canvas is half burned, and your gear is scattered. Your squire's doing his best to reorganize, stacking salvageable supplies and muttering about needing a second horse just for repairs. You sit beside Gerald, leaning your back against his warm flank. He doesn't complain. You suspect he's just as tired as you. Your thigh throbs where the raider's blade caught you, but it's not deep. It'll scar. Everything does now. You can't sleep, so you write. Yes, write. Every knight is expected to send letters now and then. Some dictate to scribes. You scrawl your own, ink blotchy and handwriting crooked from your sore wrist. You don't write about battle. You write about home, about that stream behind the orchard, about the way the old gate creaks. You don't mention today. Not this part. Eventually, the quartermaster makes the rounds with fresh rations. You get a heel of bread, some dried peas, and a generous ladle of what might be cabbage stew. It tastes like boiled regret, but it's warm. You eat it anyway. Night falls with a hush. No songs tonight, no wine, just the slow, steady sound of rebuilding tent poles being hammered back in, swords being sharpened in silence. You lie down with your armor beside you, just in case. And though you don't say it out loud, you're already wondering who'll be missing tomorrow. You wake up stiff, your entire body having fused into one long ache. The night was cold, and you barely slept. Your dreams were full of shifting shadows and faceless enemies. You keep seeing the knight you struck down during the raid, the one who didn't speak. You keep wondering if he had a name, or a family, or a better plan than you did. This morning is different. You're not heading into a battle or a siege. You're heading into the one part of a knight's life no bard ever sings about, the hospital. Except it's not a hospital. It's a tent, or sometimes a barn, or even just a dry patch of ground with enough space for a wounded body and someone with a steady knife hand. You're limping. That thigh wound from earlier? It's begun to pulse with heat. That's a bad sign. Your squire helps you out of your armor, wincing as he pulls the greave from your leg. You try not to groan. Knights are supposed to be silent when in pain. You fail spectacularly. Here's a mainstream historical fact to chew on. In the medieval world, the person most likely to treat your wound was not a trained doctor, but a barber, surgeon. The The same guy who trimmed beards and pulled teeth was also your best chance at not dying of infection. He carried a saw in one hand and a bucket of vinegar in the other. That's your healthcare plan. Oh. You reach the surgeon's tent and are greeted by the unmistakable smell of iron and herbs and something worse, something sour and cloying that sticks to your tongue. You gag slightly. The man inside doesn't notice. He's focused on cauterizing a spear wound on a mercenary's shoulder, pressing a red-hot poker into torn flesh while the patient bites down on a belt. You sit on a stool. He doesn't look at you. "What is it?" he asks, still working. "Leg," you answer. He grunts. "Take off the boot." You do. Slowly. The moment he sees it, he mutters something you hope wasn't a curse. The wound's swollen now, ringed with angry red, and oozing something that doesn't belong in polite conversation. He pokes it with a stick. You lurch forward and nearly faint. He calls for his assistanta boy, who looks far too clean for this job, and tells him to heat a blade. You blink. "You're not cutting it off, are you?" you ask, half joking. He doesn't answer. Historians still argue whether medieval surgeons understood infection. Some say they knew enough to wash wounds and use honey or wine as antiseptics. Others argue it was more superstition than science. You're too busy trying not to scream to pick a side. The blade arrives, glowing faintly at the edges. The surgeon opens a pouch of herbs and chews something bitter-smelling, then spits it onto a cloth. He rubs it around the wound, while muttering about spirits and swelling. You think he's trying to distract himself more than you. Then he cuts. It's not a big cut, just a slice to release the pressure, but it feels like he's splitting your leg from hip to toe. You grip the stool until your knuckles crack. You see stars. The world narrows to heat and pain, and the sticky slosh of fluid draining into a bowl. When it's over, he packs the wound with a damp poultice and binds it tight with linen. "Don't walk too much," he says, standing. "Don't die. Next." You stumble out into the sunlight, blinking like a mole. Gerald is waiting nearby, ears forward, as if to say, "Well, still got the leg." You mumble. He snorts. You lean against him, breathing deeply. The air outside doesn't smell much better, but at least it's not blood and vinegar. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some knights believed that wounds caused by certain weapons like arrows from a cursed bow could only be healed with holy relics. One knight even demanded his wound be touched by a bishop's ring. It didn't help, but it made for a great story at dinner. You return to your tent and collapse, groaning as the linen shifts on your thigh. You'll have to stay off it for a while. No fighting, no riding, just rest. Which means, cour duty. You'd rather face 3 lances than spend a day listening to nobles argue over land borders and marriage alliances. But your commander insists. "Idle hands cause mutiny," he says. "Better to keep you bored in camp than clever outside it." So you're dragged, limping, to the command tent, where the lord of your company holds impromptu court. He sits beneath a faded banner, flanked by 2 notaries, both of whom look like they haven't smiled since infancy. A nobleman is arguing about sheep. His neighbour's flock keeps grazing 2 inches past the agreed boundary. You stifle a yawn. Your thigh screams. You consider faking unconsciousness. Another noble insists his daughter deserves a marriage alliance with someone honourable. All heads turn to you. You quickly shake your head and pretend not to hear. Gerald would make a better husband. By evening, you're excused. Your head aches worse than your leg now. You sit by the fire, watching the sparks float up into the dark. Someone offers you wine. You accept. It tastes like vinegar and regret, but it's warm, and that's enough. Later that night, your wound throbs, and you think you might have a fever. You press a damp cloth to your forehead and try not to think about the surgeon's blade, or the smell, or the possibility that the wound might come back worse tomorrow. But you're alive, and in the brutal life of a knight, that's all you can really ask for. The rain starts just before dawn, a slow, deliberate tapping on the canvas above your head that grows louder with each passing minute. You stare at the sagging roof of your tent and sigh. The sky is weeping, the ground is soup, and your thigh feels like someone stuffed it with smouldering coals. But today, you're finally leaving the siege. Not because you've won, not because you've lost, but because you're being sent home. Well, home is a generous term. You're still a few dozen leagues from anything resembling your own bed, but the siege is ending, or at least your part in it is. The commander summoned you last night, after the wine. after the bickering nobles and the chorus of moaning wounded. He said your injury was enough to justify your withdrawal, that you had earned your rest. You didn't argue. Now you're packing your gear, carefully, slowly. Your squire helps, wrapping your sword in oilcloth and handing you your mail shirt with reverence, even though it's missing a dozen rings and smells like regret. Gerald is saddled already. His ears flick as if to say, finally. You nod to a few other knights as you limp through the camp. Some nod back, others don't bother. You pass the tent of the barber surgeon. A scream bursts from inside. You keep walking. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many knights who returned from campaigns didn't go straight home. They joined another army, or drifted from one lord's service to another, earning their coin where they could. War was their profession, and peacetime didn't offer many job listings for professional sword guy. You reach the outer camp as the wagons creak into motion. Supplies, wounded men, a few prisoners, and those too broken to be useful anymore rolling down the muddy path towards safer roads. You ride alongside them for a while, Gerald's hooves sinking with every step. You pass through burned fields, abandoned farms, and one village where the children hide at the sight of your banner. You don't blame them. The wind smells different out here, fresher, not cleaner, but less soaked in death. You let it fill your lungs and feel something in your chest loosen. Maybe it's relief, maybe it's the fever. 2 days into the journey, your thigh gets worse. The wound weeps through the bandage. Your squire changes the dressing twice a day, murmuring things you can't quite hear. You ride slower. Gerald adjusts without complaint. You sleep sitting up. Everything hurts. Here's a lesser-known fact. Some knights carried charms or relics stitched into their clothing pieces of saints' bones, splinters from the true cross, tiny bottles of holy water to protect them from infection and death. You never believed in that stuff before. But now, as your leg swells and your dreams get stranger, you wish you'd kept something sacred in your pocket. One night, your fever spikes. You sweat through your tunic and mutter nonsense about fire and teeth. Your squire wakes you with a cold cloth and a voice that barely hides the worry. You're burning up, he says. You nod, even though your vision is swimming. Don't die now, he adds. You try not to. The next morning you wake to sunlight. Real sunlight. Not filtered through smoke or canvas, but clean, golden light spilling over dew-covered grass. You take a deep breath and realize somehow you're feeling better. Not healed, not whole, but better. The road home is long. You pass a monastery where monks offer soup and advice. You eat the soup. You ignore the advice. You pass a village where a boy asks if you're a knight. You nod. He asks if you've killed anyone. You nod again, slower. The squire tells him you're a hero. You say nothing. Later that day, you help lift a wounded man from a broken cart. He grabs your hand, holds your gaze, and says thank you. It's the first time someone's said that in weeks, maybe months. Historians still debate how knights were treated after campaigns. Some returned to honor and comfort. Others were forgotten, broken, or sent back into battle before they could even clean their armor. It depended on the war, on the Lord, on luck. Your own homecoming isn't a celebration. There's no parade, no feast, just the sound of your horse's hooves echoing in the narrow stone courtyard. A stable boy takes Gerald without a word. You limp through the halls of your family's keep, each step echoing against stone, every portrait on the wall watching silently. Your chamber hasn't changed. The same bed, the same table, the same view, but you have. You sit on the edge of the mattress and remove your gauntlets. Your hands look older, thinner. You run a finger over the scar on your thigh, now sealed and aching with the memory of heat and steel. That night, you sleep in linen sheets, clean and soft. You close your eyes, and dream not of war, but of riding. Just riding through a green field with the sun on your back and no one chasing you. It's the best dream you've had in months. And for once, it doesn't end in blood. You're home, yes, but don't mistake that for rest. In the days that follow your return, you realize something most squires are never told. Court life, for a knight, is often worse than battle. There's no mud, no fire, no iron ringing against your helmet in its place. There's gossip sharp as daggers and obligations as heavy as plate armor. The halls of your keep are quiet, echoing with a polite tension that settles into your bones more uncomfortably than any fever. The servants bow, but their eyes flicker toward your limp. The steward smiles too tightly. Even the dogs seem unsure whether to sniff you or avoid you. It starts with a banquet. Of course it does. Your lord holds one in your honor, not out of warmth, but because it's expected. A knight returns from war, and must be paraded like a trophy stag. You sit at the long table, your leg aching beneath layers of fine wool, staring at roasted meats you can't taste, and wine that burns more than it soothes. To your right, a lady with ringlets piled like a tower leans in and asks if it's true you killed 10 men with a single stroke. You nearly choke on a grape. Not quite, you mutter. She laughs anyway. She doesn't care if it's true. She just wants the story. Here's a historical fact for you. In many courts, especially during the 13th and 14th centuries, knights were expected not just to fight, but to entertain. They composed poetry, played instruments, judged tournaments, and danced. You, who spent the last month dodging crossbow bolts and wading through mud, are now expected to waltz. And worse still, recite. Your name's been placed on the list for the midsummer tourney. Not as a competitor, your legs still won't allow it, but as a judge. Which means long hours watching barely trained nobles flail at one another in the list field, while you sit on a dais trying to look intrigued. One such match ends when a boy of maybe 16 accidentally throws his sword into the audience. You duck just in time. The lady with the ringlets applauds. But court life doesn't just berate, also bites. You're approached by merchants asking for endorsements, by clergy asking for land donations, and by ambitious younger knights asking for mentorship. One bold noble even hints at a marriage alliance. You're still wondering if he meant his daughter, or himself. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some knights, particularly those who disliked politics, took unofficial vows of silence, while at court not for spiritual reasons, but purely to avoid being dragged into disputes over who said what to whom at which feast. You're starting to understand the appeal. You spend more and more time at the stables, brushing Gerald, who has adapted to retirement better than you. He seems content to munch hay and occasionally stare into space with the wisdom of someone who's seen things and doesn't feel the need to talk about them. Every evening, you sit at the stone wall behind the keep, looking out over the same fields you rode through as a squire. They seemed so vast then, so full of promise. Now they feel small, enclosed, like a pasture too tidy to hold anything wild. You feel out of place, too sharp for a life that's gone soft. Historians still argue what the ideal knight was supposed to be: a killer, a scholar, a romantic, a monk. But in truth, many knights ended up caught between those identities, expected to shift depending on who was watching. You're beginning to feel like a mask that keeps changing faces. One night, you hear music drifting through the courtyard, lutes, voices, the clatter of cups. A troubadour sings of a great battle, of a knight who rode alone into enemy lines and emerged without a scratch. The crowd cheers. You remember that battle. You were there. The knight he sings about died in the mud, face down, with no banner and no name. No one noticed until hours later. You raise your goblet in silent toast, not to the song but to the one forgotten. Later, back in your chamber, you find your old practice sword. You test the weight. It's lighter than you remember. You swing it once, twice, then stop. Your leg twinges. You sit down. You're not the same. And court is not a place that makes space for the changed. A letter arrives the next day sealed with the mark of your commander. Another conflict, brewing on the border. Another call to arms. You stare at it for a long time. Your squire finds you that evening polishing your sword. "Are we riding again?" he asks. You don't answer. Not yet. But you know the answer. Of course you are. Because for all the feasts and tapestries and titles, you were never made for marble halls. You were made for the mud. You're back on the road, before the frost lifts from the rooftops. No fanfare this time. No banquet, no parades. Just the quiet scrape of armor being strapped on by half-frozen fingers and the low muttering of men who know what they're walking into. Another conflict, another cause, another corner of the kingdom that's supposedly worth dying over. Your squire rides ahead, slightly more confident this time. He's grown into the role. You, on the other hand, feel as if you've outgrown yours. Not in ability, you still ride well, fight with precision, endure as you always have, but in spirit. It feels different now. Not darker, just heavier. The army's smaller this time. A patchwork of knights, mercenaries, and levied peasants with eyes too wide for their faces. You see it in them, that first-time fear. The kind you had once, standing on your first battlefield, wondering if the stories had lied. They had. All of them. The road winds through villages that have seen too many banners and too few seasons of peace. The people don't cheer. They don't wave. They just watch from behind, shutters or cracked doors, clutching children, whispering prayers. You nod to them out of habit. They nod back without hope. Here's a historical truth. Many knights were deployed more than once a year whenever their liege demanded it. The concept of leave, or rotation, didn't exist. If you could stand, you could serve. And if you couldn't, well, there were always squires eager to inherit your horse and gear. You reach the borderlands within days. The terrain is rough-wooded, hilly, laced with streams and the bones of old battles. You can feel the tension crackling like dry branches underfoot. You don't even unpack your saddlebags. This isn't a long-term siege. It's a strike, swift, brutal, and done before the grass regrows. On the second night, scouts report enemy movement. You don't sleep. Neither does Gerald. You sit in your saddle for hours under a moonless sky, listening to wind through the trees and the occasional owl with impeccable comedic timing. Your squire offers you a dried apple. You chew it like it's your last meal. Then it comes dawn and blood in the same breath. The clash is smaller than your last engagements, but no less vicious. You charge at first light, your company splitting like a blade into enemy lines. It's chaos of coarse mud, steel, hooves, and screaming. Your sword bites through chainmail. A man stumbles backward, clutching his throat. Another tries to stab your side. You knock his blade away with your vambrace and punch him hard enough to feel it in your elbow. You don't think anymore. You move. Muscle memory and instinct. You swing, block, duck, stab. Your leg holds. Barely. Here's a historical debate worth noting. Some argue that late medieval knights were less important on the battlefield by this period, replaced gradually by pike formations, crossbows, and emerging gunpowder. And yet when things got messy, it was still the knights they sent to finish it. Your company takes losses. A familiar face, Sir Garlannis, thrown from his horse and trampled. You reach for him, but it's too late. Another knight falls beside you, his helm split like an egg. You keep moving, not because you're heartless, because stopping means joining them. Eventually, the enemy line buckles. Retreat turns to rout. You don't chase. That's not your role today. You pull back, bloodied, bruised, and somehow still breathing. You regroup at a copse of trees. Your commander wipes a blade on a scrap of banner and nods. That'll do. That night, the camp is quieter than usual. No songs, no dice games. Just the soft hiss of wet clothes drying near fires, and the quiet scraping of blades being cleaned. You sit with your squire, who's still wide-eyed and wired. You didn't hesitate, he says. You shrug. Didn't have time. You saved my life. You look at him. Really look. He's got a cut on his cheek and a tremble in his hands. But he's still here. That's something. You offer him a flask water this time. That makes us even. He smiles. You don't. Later, you find Gerald resting near the edge of the camp, staring out toward the dark hills. You sit beside him, resting your hand on his neck. He huffs softly, like he understands. Maybe he does. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some knights spoke to their horses like brothers, even gave them ranks and personalities. It wasn't just affection, it was survival. A good horse meant life or death. And Gerald? He's the reason you're still telling this story. You lie down in the grass, armor off but sword nearby, and look up at the stars. They're bright tonight, sharp, cold. You wonder how many other knights are staring at them from other camps, other wars. Maybe they're thinking the same thing you are. How many more battles? How many more marches? How long until the next call? Because even now, with blood still under your fingernails and your shoulder throbbing from an old wound reopened, you know this isn't the last. It never is. You are a knight, not by title, not by birth, by repetition. You don't ride back in triumph. There's no cheering crowd, no flower-strewn path, just the same dirt road, the same creaking saddle, and the same dull ache in your bones. The battle is over if it can be called that, but the scars are fresh, and the silence on the journey home is louder than any war horn. Your squire walks beside Gerald, his armor scuffed, his boots heavy with dried blood. He doesn't speak unless spoken to. You don't mind. You're not in the mood for stories. and neither is the world around you. Even the birds seem too tired to sing. The countryside rolls by in shades of green and brown, patched with the smoke of far-off hearths and the thin spires of village chapels. You pass fields that once bore wheat, now trampled by hoof and war. You pass graves. So many graves. Some marked, most not. Here's your final mainstream historical truth. Most medieval knights didn't die in battle. They died from disease, infection, or when their fortunes turned execution. The ones who made it home often found themselves crippled, forgotten, or worse, reassigned. You were lucky this time. But luck, like armor, doesn't last forever. The keep appears on the horizon after 3 days' ride, smaller than you remembered, weather-worn and cracked at the edges. The banners still fly, though they're faded now. You wonder if anyone even knows where you've been, what you've done. They open the gate without question. You're expected, apparently. A servant bows, another rushes to take your gear. You wave them off. You want to do it yourself. You need to feel the weight of it one more time before it's hung in the armory. Silent and still. You collapse onto the bench in your chamber. The room is quiet, clean, unchanged. You are none of those things. There's a letter waiting on the table, sealed in wax, unbroken. You don't open it. You know what it says. Another campaign. Another border. Another call. You'll read it tomorrow. Maybe. You sit beside the hearth and watch the fire dance across the stone. Gerald is stabled safely. Your squire sleeps in the barracks. You could rest. You should. But instead, you stare at the embers and think. You think about the first man you killed, the one who never saw your face. You think about the last man who did. You think about the things you've done in the name of banners, kings, and oaths. You wonder if they'll remember you when you're gone, if your crest will hang in a hall, or if it'll be melted down for someone else's war. You wonder if your name will pass into song or into dust. Historians still argue whether the chivalric code was ever truly followed, or if it was just a dreamer shiny lie told to boys with swords and fathers who wanted to believe they'd raised more than just killers. You're not sure anymore. You stand slowly, remove your gauntlets, and place them gently on the mantle, then your sword, then your belt. Each piece feels like a chapter closing. You lie in your bed and let the silence wrap around you. Outside, the wind picks up, whistling through the battlements like a voice that doesn't quite know the words. And for the first time in a long time, you sleep without your armor beside you. The fire in the hearth burns low now, the shadows long and soft along the walls of your chamber. The war drums are far away, muted, a memory now. Your limbs are heavy, your breath even. The weight you carried, the armor, the sword, the oath rests somewhere else tonight. Outside, the night stretches quiet across the hills, broken only by the gentle rustling of trees and the far-off call of a watchman changing shifts. You're safe, for now. No battles, no banners. Just the stillness that follows the storm. Your thoughts drift like mist over a sleeping field slow, shapeless, harmless. The faces you saw, the swords you swung, the roads you rode, they blur and soften and fade. Time has a way of smoothing the sharp edges. Even steel, eventually, loses its bite. You feel your hand resting near the hilt of a sword that's no longer there, an old habit, a small ghost, but it doesn't haunt you tonight. Not here, not now. Tonight you're just a man, not a knight, not a symbol, not a blade, just a soul wrapped in warmth, floating gently toward dreams that ask nothing of you. You shift slightly under the blanket. The hearth crackles once, then stillness. Let the weight go. Let the war go. Let the world go. Sleep. Night. You've done enough. Good night.